11 days after my father's funeral, I sat alone in the office he built before I was born. The leather chair still smelled like him, cedar and black coffee, and the particular discipline of a man who never wasted a single hour. I wasn't there to grieve. I was there to understand the full weight of what he had left behind, and what he had apparently left behind for someone else entirely. Harlan Mercer built Mercer Industrial Supply over 4 decades. He began with a single warehouse lease and a handshake credit line from a local bank whose branch no longer exists. By the time I joined the company at 28, it had grown into a mid-Atlantic distribution anchor with 14 contracted facility sites, 200 employees, and a regional reputation so solid that competitors used us as a benchmarking reference. I had spent 12 years helping him grow it, modernize it, and protect it. I understood every liability, every legacy contract, every pressure point in the operation. I thought I understood my father just as completely. I was wrong about exactly one thing. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, sent by a Savannah-based law firm I had never heard of. It was addressed formally to the estate of Harlan Mercer and copied to me as the named executor. The sender identified himself as Dominic Voss. He was 31 years old. He had a notarized DNA test conducted 18 months before my father's death, the results of which my father had apparently reviewed, acknowledged in a private letter, and then said absolutely nothing about to anyone in our family. Dominic was claiming entitlement to a 50% stake in Mercer Industrial Supply under a private promise my father had allegedly made before his health declined. I read the letter 3 times, not looking for a loophole, but for evidence of my own blindness. There were no dramatic cracks in my composure. I had built too many financial models under pressure to let shock interfere with analysis. My father had kept a secret for over 3 decades, and it was now sitting in a sealed envelope on my desk, demanding equity. The appropriate response was not to collapse. It was to conduct a full audit of exactly what Dominic Voss was asking for and whether he understood the true nature of his request. I called our family attorney, Gerald, that same evening. He had represented my father for 22 years and knew the company's legal architecture better than anyone outside my own office. He arrived the next morning with a yellow legal pad and the specific energy of a man preparing for a long fight. He told me we had strong grounds to contest any informal promise of equity. He said the DNA relationship, while likely valid, created no automatic ownership claim without a formal testamentary instrument. He was ready to litigate. I let him finish. Then I told him I didn't want to fight. Gerald looked at me the way people look at someone they suspect has been quietly replaced. He asked me to say it again. I said it again. I told him I wanted to prepare clean transfer documents for a controlling operational stake in Mercer Industrial Supply. I wanted to give Dominic exactly what he was asking for. I watched Gerald's face cycle through 5 distinct expressions before landing on reluctant professional compliance. What Gerald didn't know, and what I had no obligation to tell him in that moment, was that I had already spent 60 hours inside the company's financial records before Dominic's letter ever arrived. The diagnosis that killed my father had been slow-moving, and in the final 18 months of his life, he had quietly made a series of operational decisions that I had flagged to him as concerns and that he had quietly dismissed. I had assumed it was the stubbornness of a founder who refused to cede control, even to his own daughter. Now I suspected it was something more deliberate. He had taken on 3 new facility expansion leases at deeply unfavorable terms. He had renegotiated 2 anchor distribution contracts in a way that appeared to reduce our liability on the surface, but actually transferred enormous performance risk inward. He had allowed a tax deferment arrangement to roll forward unresolved for 2 consecutive fiscal years, a ticking obligation that had quietly compounded into something significant. The company my father built was structurally impressive. The company he left behind was a different matter entirely. I ordered a comprehensive forensic review through an independent firm 2 weeks before Dominic's letter arrived. I told them I needed a clean picture of every contingent liability, every deferred obligation, and every performance clause buried inside our active commercial agreements. The report came back 3 days after Dominic's attorney, a sharply dressed woman named Carla, called to schedule an initial meeting. I read the full report in a single sitting. The picture it painted was of an operational entity carrying $4.8 million in effectively concealed near-term liability. The expansion leases contained acceleration clauses triggered by any change of controlling ownership. The renegotiated distribution contracts carried minimum performance penalties that would be immediately auditable upon a transfer event. The deferred tax position had grown to a figure that would require immediate resolution the moment a new ownership structure was filed with the state. My father had not been careless. He had, I now believed, been doing exactly what he always did, thinking several moves ahead of everyone in the room. I believe he saw Dominic coming long before the formal DNA letter arrived. I believe he restructured the company's liability posture specifically so that any external claim on the business would carry the full weight of its hidden obligations. He never told me because he knew I would object on principle. He left me the forensic trail because he trusted me to find it. The meeting with Dominic and Carla took place in a neutral conference room downtown. Dominic was polished in the way of someone who had rehearsed a particular version of himself for this occasion. He was not openly hostile, but there was a proprietary ease in the way he occupied the room that told me he had been mentally living inside this outcome for some time. He spoke about legacy. He spoke about acknowledgement. He spoke about the years of distance and the simple human desire to be recognized as his father's son. Some of what he said was probably genuine. People can want both justice and an inheritance at the same time, and the two desires do not always cancel each other out. But he wanted the company. That part was entirely transactional. Carla was competent and prepared. She walked through the legal basis for the claim with precision, citing the private acknowledgement letter my father had written, the DNA documentation, and the argument for equitable recognition under estate law. She was building toward a negotiation. She expected me to counter. I didn't counter. I told her I had reviewed the claim, and I agreed that Dominic deserved acknowledgement of his relationship to my father and a fair resolution of any stake in the family business. I said I was prepared to sign over a controlling 51% operational interest in Mercer Industrial Supply to a trust established in Dominic's name. The silence in the room lasted approximately 4 seconds. Carla smiled carefully. Dominic's expression was the specific expression of a man trying to determine whether a gift is real before he reaches for it. They exchanged a brief glance that communicated something along the lines of, "We were prepared for a war, and we appear to have won without firing a shot." Carla said she would need to review any transfer documents carefully before execution. I told her that was entirely appropriate and that I would have my attorney deliver a full package, including the company's certified financial disclosures, within 48 hours. The document package I delivered was 340 pages. The first 40 pages were the transfer agreement itself, straightforward and favorable to Dominic on its face. The remaining 300 pages were the complete certified financial disclosures, the forensic review summary, the lease acceleration schedule, the distribution contract penalty matrix, the deferred tax resolution notice, and a full enumeration of the contingent liability position that would attach, irrevocably and immediately, to the new controlling owner upon execution of the transfer. The signing was scheduled for a Thursday morning. I arrived early. Gerald sat beside me looking exactly like a man who had stopped arguing with a decision he didn't understand but had decided to trust. Dominic arrived with Carla and a junior associate carrying a second copy of the transfer package. Dominic was composed. He had dressed for a milestone. The notary sat up at the end of the table. The documents were arranged in order. Dominic reached for the pen. Carla's junior associate, who had apparently been tasked with a final review of the disclosure package the previous evening, leaned forward and placed her hand firmly on Carla's arm. She said something in a voice too low for me to hear completely. I caught 2 words, acceleration clause. Carla's hand, which had been moving toward her own copy of the agreement, stopped. She picked up the disclosure index. She turned to page 187, which was the lease acceleration schedule. She read for approximately 90 seconds. The color left her face with the quiet efficiency of a tide going out. She turned to page 241, which contained the deferred tax resolution summary. She closed the document. She looked at me across the table. I met her eyes and said nothing. She asked if we could have a brief recess. I said, of course. Dominic looked between the two of us with the dawning awareness of someone who has just realized the room has a different temperature than he thought. He asked Carla what was wrong. She told him, with the measured calm of someone delivering catastrophic news in a professional setting, that the company he was about to sign for carried a near-term liability obligation in excess of $4.8 million, triggered entirely and immediately by the ownership transfer he was about to execute. He would not be inheriting a legacy. He would be inheriting a collection of contractual obligations that would begin detonating within 90 days of his signature, leaving him personally exposed as the controlling owner of an entity structurally unable to absorb the impact. I had not hidden any of this. It was all in the disclosure package, properly certified, filed in accordance with state estate transfer requirements. Every single page of it had been provided in advance, as required. What I had not done was summarize it, soften it, or volunteer a guided tour of the section most likely to deter him from signing. He had demanded a company. I had given him the complete picture of the company he was demanding. The signing did not proceed that Thursday. Dominic withdrew his claim entirely 6 weeks later. He retained the legal acknowledgement of his paternity, which I did not contest and never would have. The relationship between him and my father's memory was his to process in whatever way he needed. That was never my territory. What was my territory was Mercer Industrial Supply. I spent the following 14 months executing a deliberate structural restructuring of the company. I resolved the deferred tax position. I renegotiated 2 of the 3 problematic leases, exiting one entirely at a negotiated cost that was far lower than the acceleration penalty would have been. I rewrote the performance clauses in the distribution contracts with the help of an outside counsel who specialized in exactly this kind of commercial exposure. The company that exists now is clean. My father left me a business with damage built into the foundation. He also left me the tools to find it, the authority to fix it, and his absolute confidence that I would do both. He was right, though he could have simply told me instead of leaving it as a puzzle. That was always his preferred teaching method. He never gave you the answer when he believed the process of finding it yourself was more valuable than the answer alone. I don't carry bitterness about what he kept from me. I carry the understanding that some people protect the people they love through concealment, and that it is a form of love, even if it is an imperfect one. I do carry one lesson above all others. When someone demands something from you with absolute certainty, the most powerful thing you can do is step back, let them have it, and make sure they've read every single page first. True leverage is never loud. It lives quietly inside the details that the other side was too eager to overlook. I didn't outmaneuver Dominic Voss. I simply refused to hide the truth from someone who was demanding it. He just hadn't expected the truth to be quite so thorough.